The FNAF movie just got a big update that tells us a lot about the movie, and it confirms a decent bit, along with some other news coming around in the past couple weeks as FNAF officially turned 8 years old. So in terms of movie news, I don't think I need to tell you guys that the FNAF movie has been a long time coming. And of course, most recently in the past few months, the CEO of Blumhouse Productions, the creators of the FNAF movie, named Jason Blum, has sort of recently been hinting at some new movie news coming for FNAF, which is super exciting because Scott Cawthon was initially very vocal with us about the movie, even sharing with us all the scrapped scripts for it. But recently, things have been entirely quiet, and everybody has been looking to Blum himself to give us some news for the movie. And I'm sure we all remember the infamous Dangerously Close interview earlier this year, where Blum told us we were supposedly, as he said, dangerously close to getting some new updates for the FNAF movie that ultimately never ended up coming. However, despite that disappointing interview a few months ago, recently things have been a lot different. Blum has been replying to fans on Twitter and even making standalone tweets trying to reassure all the fans who have recently flooded his account in anticipation for the movie that it still was coming soon. And while initially this just pissed fans off even more because they were tired of being told stuff and not shown anything to prove it, yesterday all of that changed. Basically, Jason randomly dropped this bombshell tweet saying, quote, "It's great to be working with Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Their experience and expertise with animatronics is absolutely killer." And in this picture, we can literally see them working on the movie itself. This obviously blew up Twitter like anything FNAF related, and it tells us a lot about the film. Most importantly, the fact that this film will be using real-life animatronics instead of pure CGI like we may have thought. But that's to be expected from Blumhouse since they are most known for making lower-budget horror films, and this seems to be forming into at least a similar mold. Looking at the animatronics that we have in the photo, the one most front and center appears to be, of course, Freddy Fazbear himself, and it seems to be styled most similarly to the very first game. We know it's Freddy just because the microphone and the iconic little bow tie, and while he doesn't have any sort of face yet, I'm assuming that's what they're currently working on. Another animatronic also seems to be being built over here as well, and this maybe could be the face of Freddy, but it seems to look more like Foxy, or some other people even theorize it could be a Springtrap model of some sorts. By the way, if anyone who knows anything about movie creation is watching, something that confuses me is why in the world is Freddy so small? Because I can assume in the movie he's gonna be full-sized, but in this specific model he is so much smaller and looks more like a little figure than a real-life animatronic. Granted also that there hasn't been any paintwork done to him quite yet, but that still confuses me about the movie. And another something that I think is worth mentioning is that this little tease actually says a ton about the progress done with the movie, because with them working on physical animatronics for filming, that has to mean that the FNAF script is officially done and we have a story too. Because one of the biggest fears that Scott had while writing scripts was that if it wasn't absolutely 100% perfect, they could start filming and then he would scrap it and then they'd have to leave everything that they already built behind. So when considering that, the fact that they're filming right now makes me assume that it has to be finished and perfected as a script. And while of course this image shows to us that they're still in the very early filming process, just being past the script writing stage is a huge deal for this movie 7 years into its making, because it's really the first time it's ever happened. But with that being said, if everything goes to plan, when will it release? Well, on the same day that all this news broke, a new interview was discovered by Deadline talking to Jason Blum once again, and he has even more things to say about the FNAF movie. Jason in the interview was asked, "What are you most excited about from the Blumhouse slate coming out in the next year?" And he replied with, "I'm very excited about Five Nights at Freddy's, which has been a long time coming, but we're getting very close. As I tweeted the other day, dangerously close." So there he goes again about the dangerously close crap. I'm just gonna brush over that. But what's really important here is the question itself. What are you most excited about from the Blumhouse slate coming out in the next year? So Jason Blum, whether he meant it or not, literally just confirmed for us that the movie is coming in 2023. This was something that we already suspected because in the first interview talking about Five Nights at Freddy's with Jason Blum, he teased a release date for the FNAF movie by saying, quote, "So that could certainly be in 23 when talking about when the movie would come out." But at that time, people were brushing it off as some random estimate in the moment, yet here we are again hearing about this exact same release date in 2023. So I think that it's all but officially confirmed now that the film will release sometime in 2023 if things go to plan. Blum after this seemed to have a good sense of humor about it all, since he was retweeting stuff like this guy saying, "If this isn't real, I would throw myself out of the window," which I hope means that this is in fact real news. Overall as a whole, I'm actually so insanely happy with this big update, because I've actually made multiple negative videos, especially recently on the FNAF movie, just overall trashing the garbage rollout of it thus far, and up until this point, I think I was pretty correct to have that opinion, because before they kept doing things like lying about release dates and saying new things were coming on the horizon when nothing was coming out, but things seem to at least be improving now by a decent bit. But of course, I still have a few questions I think are worth mentioning. For example, why haven't we heard anything about this finished script? Because of course, while Scott is almost never active anymore, as I'm sure we all know, with the movie specifically, he was always quick to tell us when things were going well for it, and of course when things were going wrong, as we mentioned. And I assumed, especially after he was entirely wrong about the original filming estimate he gave a while back of spring 2021, that he was gonna communicate when something new did happen, but he still hasn't. And as a whole, I'm really confused with that, because if they really are filming, that means they have things like casting to do. Or at the very least, they need a director, because as of right now, there is no announced director for the film or any other crew outside of Jason Blum and Scott Cawthon, of course. So I definitely still have a lot of questions about this movie still and its release, just because we aren't hearing as many things from Scott Cawthon himself, and most information we're getting is coming from other sources who don't seem to be nearly as reliable. But I also can't blame him for not wanting to talk online when considering what has happened in the past year that sort of led him away from the internet as a whole. But regardless, I'm still super glad we're hearing about this film, and this was all coming, by the way, just a few hours after the FNAF 8th anniversary, so it was definitely an amazing surprise to say the least. And speaking of which, while this movie news was big, just as, if not even bigger, was the 8th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's. 8 years ago, on the 8th day of the 8th month of the year, the first Five Nights at Freddy's game ever was released, sparking pretty much everything that we have now. And while we didn't get much in terms of surprises from the game developers themselves like a lot of us were hopeful, it was still nice to see so many celebrate an amazing game, and even fan game developers like Kane Carter would announce merch and other stuff for his game as a surprise, which helps mark the crazy impact of not only the official Five Nights at Freddy's games, but also the fan games and the Fanverse initiative as well, which we're not going to talk about anymore. Moving on to another thing I thought was interesting, I don't like to talk about FNAF books very often, but I feel like I have to mention something weird that happened with the books recently, because there was this new Tales of the Pizza Place book that recently was announced called Submechanophobia, which means the fear of submerged objects, which is an interesting thing to base a book off of. And to help play into that, we were given a cover for the book finally to tease for its upcoming release later this year. And of course, with anything FNAF, people did what people do, more specifically in this case, Johnny Blocks, and they went in and analyzed this cover in their own videos, pointing out specific observations like this mermaid character who shared both human-like attributes and robot ones. Now, for most of you guys who don't give a damn about the books, you're probably asking, why does this matter? Well, after people started to point this out about the cover, it randomly got changed and she was entirely removed from it. Was she removed from the book entirely? Does she have a greater purpose that we didn't hear about and it was accidentally leaked? I don't know, and while I don't like to look too deep into books, this was something really weird, especially since this was a Tales of the Pizza Place book, meaning when it does release, it should apparently have something to do with the newest game's security breach. Granted, I have no idea how, but we'll just have to wait and see. But going back into the movie talks, with us being 8 years into FNAF and 7 years into the movie's production, will it actually release in 2023? Is Jason Blum always gonna tell us that we're dangerously close to whatever? Well, I'm not sure, but check out this video to recap the rest of the movie's history while you wait. Subscribe and peace.